Testing. Doing a sound check. Test, test. Number 9. Okay, so hey Cobweb Caverns, welcome to the stream, man. Can you give me a sound check? Loud and clear. So basically today we're going to wrap up research. You know, my point in doing this last 8 videos is that I've always felt like I needed to reach out to people that are new to the hobby and try to give them a hand up. Try to make it where they are able to advance their skill a little quicker. And in that direction, I have tried through these videos to offer them as much quick advice as I could. And in this section on research, I'm trying to offer different ways for new fish keepers to do research on the fish that they have, or do research on the fish that they're interested in getting, so that they save themselves problems when they get that fish home and they can't keep it very well. And it's difficult. Sometimes there are certain fish that in our hobby that have a lot of difficulty associated with them. They're hard to breed, they're hard to keep happy, they're hard to feed, and all of these things can be helped by doing research on the type of fish, on the type of water quality, on the type of foods they require, on keeping those different kinds of foods. If you get into live food, there's a lot of information out there about how to keep, you know, vinegar eels or whatever kind of worms, wingless fruit flies, whatever it is that you're trying to keep a live food source for. There's a lot of different research and experience out there for you to gain the ability to do it fairly easy if you are just willing to do the research up front, if you're willing to spend some of your fish keeping budget on reference materials, if you're willing to spend the time searching the internet for other people's experience in these areas. And it can make a huge difference in the survivability of your fish if you can just do a little research on them, understand what they like to eat in the wild, understand what it is that you're likely going to have success if you feed them. With plecos, it's sometimes it's a crapshoot. You don't really know sometimes whether they're omnivores, or whether they are carnivores, or whether they are plant eaters, vegetarians, and sometimes you can try to feed algae wafers to a pleco that needs meat in its diet, and it won't do very well. And here you are feeding the algae wafers, and the pleco is very disinterested in those algae wafers because they don't offer it any of the food that it needs. And a lot of these things can be solved by doing good research beforehand, by looking at the anecdotal evidence. That's one person's experience. how they manage to keep their fish alive on the internet, in magazines, in periodicals, in books, and and the difference between, it behooves us as fish keepers to be able to discern whether the information that we are gathering is good information or whether it's information that we ought to take with a grain of salt. If it is just one person talking about how they manage to keep a fish alive, then you probably need to do a little background research on that person. You probably need to figure out what their successes in fish keeping are. If they've been keeping fish alive for a long time, if they've had a lot of breeding success, then you can pretty well figure that the information that they are dispensing to you is probably pretty good information. It's probably information that you can put some weight on. Whereas if you're dealing with some guy that just showed up, like me, on the internet, maybe you want to listen to what they have to say and discern to yourself whether that is valuable information for your use in research on the fish that you are wanting to keep. I would also add the caveat that a lot of times you can't find direct information on the exact species that you are keeping, but a lot of times other people are keeping similar fish, and you can use research into similar fish to get an idea sometimes, not always, but sometimes, to get an idea of how to keep your fish. If a certain person has had success with a similar fish, you can figure out what their setup was. You can figure out what their feeding information was. You can figure out what their water parameters are, and it might help. But there are an awful lot of areas where one needs to be ready to do research on the fish that they want to keep. It can be something as simple and critical as the water parameters that your fish come in on. I think I used the example of buying a fish from a big box store, and you don't know where that fish was bred. The big box store's employees won't be able to tell you where it was bred, and yet you can still see what water parameters the big box store was keeping the fish in, what parameters most people out there say are valuable for keeping that fish, and you can kind of get an idea what the area that you could be keeping that fish is, water parameter wise. We're talking TDS, we're talking pH, we're talking nitrates. You can get an idea, even in a case where there is really no solid information being given to you by an employee of a fish store, a big box store in this case. 9 times out of 10, if you buy from a local fish store, someone there is going to be able to give you an idea of what the water parameters were when that fish was shipped into them, so that they can help you decide what water parameters you should be keeping that fish in for it to thrive. And this is just one tiny corner of the kind of research that you probably need to be ready to do as a fish keeper to be able to help your fish survive. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about research. There are a lot of different areas: food sources, water parameters, tank mates. There are a lot of different areas that require research to be done. And yes, you can do it without doing any of the research. You can just buy a fish and put it in a community tank, and it may well do, good. It may survive just fine. But my experience and what I would like to pass on to new fish keepers is the idea that you stand a much better chance of keeping that fish alive if you have done some research about what that fish requires. And all of this needs to be taken with a grain of salt, in the sense that if you go buy a fish that's in 200 TDS water, when you buy it from the store and you take it home and try to put it in 30 TDS water, you're probably going to have a bad outcome, just because of the variation that you're forcing that fish to deal with. You might not, it might survive. There's always a first time for something to happen. But while fish can adjust to massive changes in their water conditions, they do much better if they adjust slowly to those changes. In the wild, sometimes fish live in little streams and creeks and rivers, and the rainy season hits, and suddenly they're living in a deluge. Suddenly the water volume that they're in is 20 times greater than it was, and it's full of mud and silt and dirt and leaves and branches and trees. So there are times in the wild where fish are forced to deal with a very sudden change in their environment, but mostly what they do well with is slow, moderate changes. If you get fish in from shipping and they're 20 degrees cold, the water they're in is 20 degrees colder than the water in your tank, you probably need to do a very slow acclimatization of those fish to the new temperature that they're going to be in. You probably don't want to flop and drop those fish straight out of that colder water into a hotter water, or hotter water into a colder water immediately. The outcome is probably going to be less than ideal. You're probably going to set your fish up for having diseases or having bad outcomes as far as their health goes. So that's why most people that get shrimp in do a several hour drip method to allow those fish, the shrimp, to adjust to the new conditions that they're going to be in, so that they don't have to go from one condition to another condition very quickly. And all of these things can be researched. All of these ideas that I'm trying to get across can be found in books, can be found in, I say higher end videos, but what I mean is YouTube videos from people that you trust, YouTube videos from people that are highlights of the hobby, so that you have a good idea that this person, they may be in businesses for themselves. Hey, Mob Guppy, welcome to the stream. Down the Wormhole is setting up a new tank. Welcome to the stream. I guess D, I'd be wanting you to talk about your new setup, since that's kind of what this, I titled this thing "So You Bought a Fish Tank," You know, for people that are setting up new fish tanks for the first time and have never done it before, any ideas that you have to offer would probably be handy for those people. Dee, I know you well enough to be pretty darn sure that you've already done your research, that you already know what it is that you need to set that tank up. And that's what I'm trying to get new fish keepers, people that are new to the hobby, to understand, is that there comes with time and experience an understanding of what is required to set a new tank up, what those fish that are going to go into that new tank require, and that's Dee's discovery is that she hates rinsing sand, and I don't blame you a bit. It can be endless. You can rinse sand for weeks sometimes and still not get it all out. I guess a good filter. A good filter is with lots of sand blocking ability in it is probably your best bet. Maybe even a sponge filter to suck up some of the fine particulate before it gets sucked up into a filter and grinds your magnet down, causes you to lose a new filter. I just, hey Kaler's Aquatics, welcome to the stream. And Dee says she's just adjusting the trios to the tap water now, and we should be good. I'm assuming that those are triops you're talking about. That's something I've never done. I do know that the fish vet got some triops for his, or maybe trios are fish. It may be groups of 3 fish. But if you're talking about triops, and that's what I'm taking from that, is the fish vet got some triops for one of his children, and he went through a long video about setting up a tank for triops. It might be worth your looking at if that's what you're doing, Dee. You may be saying trios in the sense of groups of 3. Oh, triops. Yeah. Well, I would definitely recommend looking up the Fish Vet's video on setting up a triops tank. He knows his stuff really well. That's a guy I trust a lot. I mean, the guy's a vet, so it's handy to have someone with those credentials talking about setting up new tanks and things like that. Evidently, they're kind of hard to keep. They don't live very long, so you got to keep them going. You know, keep another generation. Yeah, that's one guy that I highly recommend. And for you new fish keepers that might be viewing this, if you will notice, most of the YouTubers that are doing fish keeping videos, hey Justin Shepard, welcome to the stream. Most of the YouTubers that are doing fish keeping videos will have on their main page a listing of recommended YouTubers to look up. If you will spend some time looking through the people that they have marked off as being people that they want you to look at, you will find some excellent videos amongst those people, and I would highly recommend that anytime you know, if you come on my live stream or if you come later to view any of the people that are in the live stream, there are 3 dots on the far right side after someone's name, and one of those, if you click on those 3 dots, one of them will send you to that person's site, their YouTube channel, and I would highly recommend that. I would recommend that you going into live streams new, that you start checking out the people that go to the live streams, um, and seeing their videos. You can get an idea of how accomplished they are. You can get an idea of what they're breeding and keeping, and it will give you a great deal of information about about uh, about those people and who it is that is are in the live streams of the people. Now, some channels have 1,000 people watching, and it's going to be kind of difficult to really do a lot of in-depth research on each person in the live stream. So I understand that, but on live streams where it's a smaller number of people, I would highly recommend that is a way to research the people that are in the live stream and to get an idea of what level of fish keeper you're dealing with, and what areas of expertise they have. And that all comes under the same heading of research. We can research the people that are giving us information on YouTube, just like we can research the people that are giving us information on a website, or research the company that is giving us information on a company site where we're trying to figure out what the fish they have for sale. And I would, while I always do my best to try to get people to support their local fish store, because AKG Cichlids, welcome to the stream. I think that it is incumbent on us as fish keepers to try our best to support our local fish stores, because there are times when you cannot wait to get something. And if there is no local fish store around for you to get that stuff from, hey, Pam, I hope you're feeling better this morning. If there is no local fish store around for you to get that desperately needed part for a filter, or desperately needed medication that for a sudden illness, then you're going to have to order online and wait 3 or 4 days for it to be delivered. And there are times when that 3 or 4 days is critical. And so if you're not supporting your local fish stores, then they're not going to be there, because they're not going to be doing enough business to stay open. They're not going to be there for you to go get what you need. Now, there may be a big box store that has what you need, and in that case, then that may be the best way to go. But I personally think that local fish stores, mom and pop fish stores, there are even some local fish store chains that are really good and really deserve our attention and our business and our money, so that they will continue to be there for us to use. I had to go buy a wave maker the other day, and I need my local fish store around so that I'm not suddenly bereft of something and can't go get it, that day or the next day if I have to wait for the store to open up the next morning. But if you're not doing business with them, then they're going to go out of business, and they're not going to be there for you. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand situation. Local fish stores, mom and pop fish stores, good chain stores are also a great source of information. You can buy books. You can talk to the knowledgeable staff. Because usually in a mom and pop store, the people that work there are pretty knowledgeable about fish. I mean, you may stump them, you may talk to them about something they know nothing about, but they're more likely to tell you, hey, look, go talk to Jim over there. Jim knows about that. That's not an area where I'm really comfortable. Or wait until the store owner comes back at 5 o'clock and come in and talk to him because he knows more about that subject. I mean, research, there's a world of potential research out there. It's not just in books, it's not just in magazines, it's not just on the internet, it's not just in local fish clubs. There are people everywhere that know a lot about fish keeping, and it's up to you as a new fish keeper to find those people and to talk to them in such a way that they can help you with your issues. If you just get on the internet and start typing, my fish are dying, help me, help me, help me, you're not likely to get a whole lot of help because people just kind of, tune that out because they've heard it so much. So if you're on an internet site or if you are on like a YouTube place, don't just shout out that your fish are dying and help me right now. Give us the parameters of your tank. We expect that you have done some testing of that water quality, that you have been observing your fish, and that you can give us much more information than, quote, quote, screaming, my fish are dying, save my fish. You need to give the parameters, you need to give the tank sizes, you need to give the types of fish, you need to give what you're feeding them. You need to be able to produce a great deal of information for me or someone in my chat or someone in a live stream to be able to help you really try to pinpoint what it is that's going on with your fish. And to do that, you need to have the skills to effectively test your water. Just testing the TDS is probably not going to be enough information for someone to help you pinpoint what a disease that your fish are suffering from is, or that you have been doing 10% water changes once every 2 weeks for 5 years, and now your fish are suffering from old tank syndrome because the water quality in the tank has gotten so bad and they've slowly adjusted to it. So those are the kinds of pieces of information that someone needs to be able to help you. Hey, Fish Tropic, welcome to the stream, man. I'm trying to wrap up this area on research pointed towards new fish keepers and people that are new to the hobby so that they can kind of get wrap their head around what this hobby really represents, what the potential possibilities in this hobby are. And I think that research is probably one of the most critical areas that new fish keepers do not have a handle on. They don't even understand that that's something that they need to do. They just think that they can go to the fish store and buy a fish, and that pretty much is it. There's nothing else required, and I want to disabuse them of that idea as much as possible. I'm not trying to scare new people away. I'm not trying to say, unless you are a scientist, you can't keep fish, because that's not the case. This stuff is not rocket science. It's It's very intricate. It tends to be confusing when you first broach the subject, but it's not rocket science. It is possible to get a handle on the nitrogen cycle. It is possible to figure out how to research a new type of fish. Even fish that are being collected from the stream as we speak for the first time, it is still possible to discern some information about those fish if you are willing to do really good research. There are countless places on the internet where you can ichthyology sites. There are places where you can get so deep into this hobby that you can't believe it. But you need to practice being able to do those sorts of things. You need to be able to, at a moment's notice, I mean, you can always just Google a fish's name, either its hobby name or its actual Latin species name, and that will give you a great deal of information just from Googling. But you need to understand that there are deeper and deeper and deeper places that you can go to that will also offer research information for you. And some of them are kind of confusing. If you go to some of the fish databases, there's a lot of information there, but you need to be able to figure out how to derive that information out of what you're presented with. And sometimes that takes a little while. It takes a little bit of skill to be able to actually see, oh, I thought this came from a different area of this river, and now I see that the area that it comes from is further up the mountains and it is colder and it's different from what I thought about this fish. So there are a lot of ways in which being able to do research requires a certain amount of experience doing research so that you can get faster and faster and more effective at doing that research. And this is one of the areas that I didn't really cover in the last video, and I wanted to definitely talk about that the experience of having read a book that you bought and then having gone back to that book for closer information research many times over will allow you to remember certain parts of that book. And when you are faced with a situation or faced with a new fish, the light bulb will come on and you will say, I need to get that book back out again and re-look through that section, because I remember there being something in that section that is exactly relatable to what I'm going through right now. And I need to dig a little deeper, have a little better understanding of that section so that I can try to resolve this issue, so that I can try to better understand this species of fish and what it requires. And I keep saying this, and I have no basis for saying this other than personal experience. AJN Aquarium, welcome to the stream. I think that every dollar you spend on decent reference material, decent books, decent magazines, and by decent, I mean, something that's not a piece of junk. And as you go through the hobby and buy more books, you'll begin to realize when you bought a piece of junk that's, basically 3 inches deep and, you read the whole book and you feel like you've learned nothing from it. But a good reference material that has a lot of information in it, I think every dollar you spend on that will save you $10 in the future because of your ability to know better about what kind of fish you're going to be able to keep alive, what kind of fish you're going to be able to breed, what kind of impulse purchase you make and bring home and are suddenly faced with. All of that information that you have expended money on in the past will more than repay it, is my personal experience. If you are willing to open your mind and to be able to do the research, and just basically if you are interested enough in this subject to Fish Tropic says fish tanks are like cars, they all run different. That's exactly true. Every fish tank you're going to keep is going to be different for different reasons. And it's really handy to be able to discern what's going on in each of those tanks so that you have a good understanding of what is going on in your fish tanks. Because, and what I'm trying to get at here in a lot of ways is that inevitably, as a fish keeper, you're going to be faced sooner or later with a situation. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time researching the Tapajos. I would love to go there sometime. But unfortunately, you can no longer collect fish on the Tapajos. You have to buy them already collected. The Tapajos, I've got a 110-gallon with mostly Tapajos fish in it because of my L260s that I wanted to keep. It's not exactly a biotope tank, but it's a general biotope tank. I've got pencil fish, I've got lemon tetras, I've got reed tetras, I've got L260s, and I've got teleocyclas in it. And they're all very little fish, and they're in 110 gallons of water. And that's the way I roll. And that's, besides doing research, probably the best single piece of advice that I can give new fish keepers is to over-tank your fish. Don't overstock your tank, over-tank your fish. I guess maybe Kaylor has done a video about JN's done a video about the Tapajos and is learning how to pronounce it. Yeah, it's a gorgeous river. I've done underwater research and bank research in the sense of researching vicariously through other people's live streams and videos and books and talking to people in the hobby about keeping the fish. And there is a lot of information. Out there about the Tapajos River. And the Tapajos River has many sections in it. It's long enough to have a great deal of variation amongst the fish populations that live in it. Closer to the Amazon, the channel is very deep and very wide, and it has a lot of large tetra populations, just clouds of tetras living in it. In the shallower areas where it goes across a hard rock shield as it's dropping down from the mountains, it will present with for a lot of different species of plecos. There will be wolffish in the shallows. In the sandy regions, you will find geoffs. There are a lot of pencil fish. Now, the reed tetras that I've got don't come from the Tapajos, but they could very well exist in some of the well, JN, I'm new to your channel, so I will have to drop back and check on your channel and see what you're doing. I applaud your effort to keep Tapajos fish. I think that it is a wonderful river. You know, there are a lot of rivers in that area, and many of the others are more famous for some of the denizens that come out of them. But I think the Tapajos is probably the one river in the Amazon, the Brazilian Amazon, that I would love to spend a great deal of time on. I think a 2 or 3 month trip from the headwaters of the Tapajos down to the Amazon would be a remarkable experience. Nice, a river themed tank. Well, my 110 gallon is not exactly a river themed tank. My understanding of river themed tanks are basically that they have an under gravel setup. Nice. Basically that they have an under gravel setup that circulates the water from one end of the tank to the other and creates a heavy flow. And there are a lot of areas of the Tapajos that don't have a lot of flow. The water is shallow enough and spread out wide enough where it flows very slowly. And other rivers come along and add to that flow and create a faster and deeper flow as you go along. So you could set up almost any kind of tank, and it would qualify as a Tapajos River tank in the sense that from a little stream going into the Tapajos, you could have shallow water and very slow flow and sandy bottoms. JN says he just has a big wave maker pushing water across the 72-gallon bow front. That's a nice tank. And that's what I've done with mine. I have one filter that shoots out from the back corner of the tank onto the glass on the front side of the tank. Nice. Blue Phantoms are awesome plecos. And then I have a wave maker and a hang-on back filter on the other end of the tank. That one dumps water in and the wave maker bounces off the front glass and then goes to the back glass, and it creates a circulation in the tank so that my detritus ends up getting picked up by all the differing filtration methods that I have in the tank. I have an under gravel filter on one side and sand on the other. JN, if you go back through my videos, you can find many different videos on that 110-gallon tank and the fish that are in it. So I'm not sure that I've covered deeply enough this topic of research, because I feel like it is a topic that really needs to be talked about at length and in great depth, so that people that are new to the hobby get an idea that maybe this is something they should invest their time in. You know, there are all levels of hobbyists. There are all levels of fish keeping and new fish keeping. And some people simply want the beauty of that tank and the meditative equipoise that comes from watching fish suspended in water, and it is okay to not do in-depth research on a tank. It's completely possible to just buy fish and just buy a tank and set them up and keep them alive for a while and enjoy them as a visual thing. But if you're a person that has done that, or has bought a tank for their children and fallen in love with the idea of fish keeping, or has bought a tank just to set it up and look at, and have fallen in love with fish keeping, like so many of us that are here have, like most of the fish fam on YouTube, or FishTube as we are wont to call it, then there is a whole world of information out there to help you go from a rank amateur fish keeper to an accomplished fish keeper, to a person who is able to keep their fish alive. And my marker on that is a species that will live at least 2 years in its normal lifetime. If you can keep those fish alive for 2 years, you have reached a milestone in fish keeping ability that allows you to then direct your attention in other areas. You know, a lot of people can keep fish alive for 60 years. You know, you've got to live a long time to do it. But there are levels that you can attain in fish keeping, just like there's levels in a game, just like there's levels in everything, where you can tick off certain things. I got good enough to breed this fish. I got good enough to breed that fish. And there are clubs that reward those kinds of ticks by points if you can offer full proof that you did those things. But the ladder that you climb as a fish keeper in gaining skill is not what's important, at least not to me. What's important to me is the health of the fish that you keep. And as you climb that ladder of fish keeping ability, your fish are going to do better and better and better and better. And that's not to say that you're not going to kill fish. Any of us that have kept fish have killed fish. But the difference is that people that are really invested in fish keeping as a hobby use those fish deaths as an opportunity to get better in this hobby. They see fish deaths as something abhorrent. It's some way that they have failed. It's some way that their water quality has failed. And they know they need to not repeat that problem again. And they take steps to see to it that they gain enough information, that they learn enough, that they talk to enough people so that they can prevent that same problem from occurring again. That's not to say that it won't. Your fish are going to get ick. There's nothing you can do about it. Sooner or later, you're going to fail in a quarantine process. You're going to buy fish that are just so infected that even though they're not showing it, they still are carrying it. You know, you're going to lose fish again in the exact same way But as a fish keeper, as a real hobbyist, it is incumbent on us to take those deaths as us not observing our fish closely enough, as us failing in some way to to present those fish with a viable living environment that prevents them as much as possible from suffering those kinds of deaths. And that's basically what I am about when it comes to talking to new fish keepers. I want them to understand that if they are willing, if they are interested, if they show a certain modicum of effort in the direction of becoming a better fish keeper, the hobby will more than reward them. The pleasure of their fish will more than reward them for that effort. The pleasure of watching those fish breed and raise their young, or the pleasure of watching those young become adults and survive, all of those little things add up to the quote, quote, fish keeping hobby. And it is a remarkable hobby. It's something that's kept my attention for 40 years or more. So I think that anyone that is willing and interested in becoming a real fish keeper, in becoming a real hobbyist, in becoming an accomplished aquarist, the rewards out there, the camaraderie of like-minded people that also love the same things that you love, the joy in breeding, the joy, and everyone says, I bred my fish. The fish breed. What you did was offered them a good enough environment for them to be able to breed in. And that's what you learn in the fish keeping hobby, is that basically as hobbyists we take care of the water and we feed, and the fish take care of everything else, as long as we are giving them the ability to thrive as much as possible. The fish, as long as we give them what they need, the fish are going to lead their natural lives. They're going to breed, they're going to raise their young, they're going to set out territories, they're going to do all the things that they basically do in nature, except for the one change of it being a much smaller volume of water that they are living in. You know, there's a lot of fish that will swim miles and miles, and they're not going to be able to do that so much in a straight line. And JN brings up the issue of the problem is that in this age, participation ribbons is all a lot of people are about. Many do not strive for excellence, merely just good enough. Well, participation ribbons allow certain people to feel good about what they've done and allows them to potentially become more interested in the hobby itself so that they learn to strive for excellence more. And that's something that some people will never get out of. Some people will never get past the, as you say, participation ribbon stage. And we as hobbyists have to be okay with that. We have to understand that there are some people that are too busy to spend this much time, to spend this much money on a hobby that's basically just a hobby. William T. Imes said that basically this is a pastime, that this is something that we do as human beings to fill the empty hours of our life with. And I'm here to tell you from personal experience that it is a very remarkable pastime, that it is so much deeper than anyone can possibly imagine, and that no one out there knows it all. There will always be some corner of the hobby to which any expert is completely blind to, has no experience. Talk to excellent fish keepers about keeping freshwater clams, or maybe freshwater sponges, or like Dee was talking about, triops. There are things in this hobby that even the experts have zero experience with. And so you need to go to someone who has directed their hobby in that direction and has high experience in that direction. So what I'm trying to say to new fish keepers is it's okay if all you want to do is to be a participation ribbon hobbyist, or if all you want to do is buy fish and put them in a tank and have some company come in and take care of them just so that you can watch and enjoy those fish. That's perfectly all right. But if it bites you, like it's bitten so many of us, multiple tank syndrome takes over, species collecting takes over. So many of us as fish keepers have been bitten by this bug of fish keeping to the point where we are willing to spend thousands of dollars and go thousands of miles out into the wild to rough it in the wild and to collect these fish ourselves and to personally see the habitats that these fish come from. And there are people who have spent their entire lives, all of their professional lives, and most of their just normal lives, in pursuit of learning more and more and more about this hobby. It has given them livelihoods. They have written books. They have started companies. They make their whole livelihood from fish keeping. It is that deep. It is that wide. It is that varied. And even people who just love ecosystems of our planet, love nature, love the wild. There is a clarion call ringing through this hobby right now that people are pointing to the fact that climate change is drastically changing the natural habitat that is out there, that water systems are drying up all over the world due to higher populations, due to higher temperatures in the air, due to pollution from things like strip mining and certain agricultural runoffs of fertilizers, and the stripping of the forest from the planet to make room for people and the things that people want to do. There are places on this planet now where you can no longer get fish from their natural habitat because that habitat has been destroyed by pollution, or that habitat has dried up and no longer exists. So there are a lot of species out there in this hobby right now that aren't going to be in this hobby right now unless we as fish keepers are able to keep their lines going in our personal breeding. Some companies We'll try to keep certain lines going. Have a good day, JN Aquarium. I will check out your channel and try to get back with you on the Tapajos subject. All right, guys, I'm going to close this up. We're at the hour mark right now. I'm going to shut this down, and the next couple of videos that I do in this will be on stock, will be on the fish themselves, on how we as fish keepers and new fish keepers need to understand the fish that we have suddenly bought on an impulse, and it happens to all of us. We all go to the store, see something in the store we've never seen in our lives, don't recognize from any book we've ever seen, and it may come in as a contaminant. It may come in because the people that are selling it don't understand what it is, but your fish keeping skill is good enough that you recognize what it is, or you recognize that it is something that you don't recognize at all, and we buy it on the spot because we don't want someone else to get it and kill it. We want to keep it alive and figure out exactly what it is. This happens less and less in this day and age because contaminants don't come in as much in shipments because people understand what contaminants are. They understand that this is something new and different, and they want to sell it for big bucks. But I think we need to spend a great deal of time talking about stock, talking about what fish to put in what tank with what other fish. And there's a great deal of information out there about that. And I think we should cover that for new fish keepers. All right, guys, have a good rest of the weekend. Good luck with your fish. I keep telling myself I need to do videos instead of live streams, but so far I've just not gotten myself motivated to do it. I will try to get around to doing that more soon here in the future to give you guys some actual content instead of just live streams. Good luck with your fish.